Wisdom hastens to make herself known to those who desire her. Wisdom hastens to make herself known. You know, our first reading is really all about God's desire to come into our lives. And a couple weeks ago, I think most of you know, I was on a spiritual retreat, which was a wonderful 5 days to really just kind of get away from the world, get away from technology, to rest and to spend time in prayer and really reconnect with the Lord. I remember my spiritual director that week, the first day I met with him, and he said, "Stephen, what's your desire for this week?" And I said, "Well, my desire is to rest." And I said, "But also it's to really just spend time with Jesus, to reconnect with him and just pray." And he just looked at me and he said, "That's good." Yeah, exactly. "That's good," he said, "but just remember that as much as you desire to spend time with Jesus, he desires all the more to spend time with you. Just as much as you desire to spend time with him, he desires all the more to spend time with you." And it just was a nice reminder that as much as I want to be with the Lord is always seeking to be with us. The Lord is always knocking at the door of our hearts. You know, this is a part of Christianity itself, that we believe in a God who seeks us out. You know, this is the story of the Old Testament. God created us out of grace, God created us out of love, and then he is always finding ways to reconcile the people to himself, so much so that he sends his son. And then Jesus comes into our world to remind us and to bring us back to the Father who loves us. And then, of course, Jesus emphasizes this when he says, "I would leave the 99 and search for the one." Jesus is always looking for us. God's grace is always first. God is always first. So that's the point of our first reading, that God's grace is first, that God's love is first, and God is always seeking us out. Then we have our gospel, which I think many of us, you would agree with me, is a very confusing gospel. Because oftentimes we hear Jesus speak, and he's all about how do we serve one another, how do we love one another, how we lay down our lives for each other. And this gospel is one where it seems like Jesus is doing the opposite, because he definitely affirms the wise virgins in our gospel. They did the right thing. They should not have shared their oil. You know, Jesus is very clear. So what in the world is Jesus getting at in this gospel? Jesus' point is very simple. Sometimes we complicate things. We try to make all these different reasons for what he could mean, but Jesus is very simple in this gospel. There are things, especially in the spiritual life and the spiritual journey, that only you can do. No one else can. Only you can do it. In other words, only you can work on your faith. Only you can work on your project of holiness and how you're growing in love and friendship with the Lord. You know, I think we get this, but this is a very simple example. But imagine, humor me, that I was going to train for a marathon. I know, would never happen. And I said, "Hey, everyone, I'm going to train for this marathon, and the way I'm going to train is I'm going to invite all of you to run for me." Well, that'd be great if it worked that way. But it doesn't. The only way I can train for a marathon is if I do it, if I do the training. So this gospel, this parable, Jesus is saying the only way for you to grow in faith is for you to do it. You know, I think we get this. You know, many of us, we have friends, we have family, we have kids, many of you parents, where you've brought your children up to the faith, you've brought them to the sacraments, baptism, first communion, confirmation, faith formation, Catholic schools, all these things, and all that's good. All of that's good. But until your son and your daughter, until our family and our friends make faith a priority in their life, it won't be their thing. Until they make their faith, their spiritual journey important enough that it is something that they want to participate in, it won't be their thing. So we get it. We know what Jesus is saying here. So what does, when we think about the purpose or what is being proclaimed to us in our first reading in our gospel, you can boil it down to this simple point. God's grace is abundant, and he's pouring out his love upon us every day. Excuse me. And we have to respond to that grace. That's the point of our first reading and gospel. A very simple example of this is, it's Christmas is almost here, which is hard to believe. Got a lot to do. And just imagine for a moment, you got a gift for somebody, you wrapped it perfectly, it's got all the nice creases on it, which that's dumbfounding for me. I can never do it. I just use a gift bag because it's easy. We got this nice gift, there's a bow, it's creased perfect, someone gives it to you, and that's like God's grace, the gift of salvation, God's love that's given to us. But that gift isn't received until it's opened. That's really what we're hearing in our scriptures this morning. But then what is the point? What does it mean for us? Well, I think it's this. Jesus says, again, very clearly at the end of the parable, be vigilant, be ready, stay awake. What does it look for us to be vigilant, ready, and awake? Well, there was an experiment done in the past couple of years with these people that wanted to exercise more in their life, so to grow in discipline of exercise. And they had 3 groups. The first group, they said, look, all we want you to do is just track your exercise. That's it. And that group, over the 2 weeks, 38% of them exercised more than they would have otherwise. The second group, they said, we want you to track your exercise, and we also want you to watch motivational videos of people who have different ways of, encouraging people to exercise more in their life. What's fascinating about the second group is instead of going up, it went down. Only 35% of them increased exercise over the next 2 weeks. Then the third group. The third group was told, track your exercise, watch motivational videos, and put together an implementation plan. Identify the where, what, and when. Where are you going to exercise? What are you going to do? And when are you going to do it? The people that were in this group, 91% of them increased their exercise over the next 2 weeks. What's the point? Well, for us to stay vigilant and awake and ready in our faith, I think in a certain way, Jesus is saying, identify your plan. What is it going to be? What's your where, what, and when? When are you going to pray? What are you going to pray with? The scriptures, maybe it's music, but where, what, and when? When are you going to do it? This is how we stay awake. This is how we receive the gift of God's grace and love into our lives if we respond by spending time with him in prayer.